For this evening. Diane, would you like to recognize any city officials that are with us tonight?
Yes, President Pro Tem. Mayor Jamie Slutes. Here. Safety Service Director Renee Baker. Here. Chief Deputy Auditor Stephanie Myers. Here. Assistant Law Director Edmund Mack. Here. City Engineer Alex Pitts. Here. Director of Development Ted Hernkane. Thought I saw him. Parks and Rec Director Steve Pedro. Here. Income Tax Budget Director Lori Katagides-Voron. Here. Is there anyone from administration I missed? I called Stephanie. Mm-hmm. That's it, President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Diane. And let the record show that all 9 members of council are present this evening, along with President Slater. We're going to go right into public utilities and environmental. You can go ahead and continue, Mrs. Brian Huth.
Thank you, Mr. Lombardi. President Pro Tem. We were discussing the 2 pieces of legislation that are up for 3rd reading next week. And we were landing on the sewer system.
Yes, so I believe we just answered Councilwoman Kramer's question. As far as the capital improvement projects go, I think there was a question about whether or not what would we do in a crisis scenario at the plant. And essentially what we would end up doing is taking away some of the money that we would use to maintain and operate the collection side and throw it towards the plant, which is not something we want to do, but something that we probably have to do. We have to maintain our permit at the plant. Basically, taking money away from the collection side means we're not maintaining our sanitary sewer lines in the city. Which can lead to sewer backups in homes, collapses in the roadway, and so on and so forth. Nothing that, none of us want. So I just wanted to add that. I thought about that after I left the podium, so.
Mrs. Harvick-Smith?
So I have a question as far as the county contribution. Who else's water do we process through our waste management?
The county.
The whole county?
Not the whole county. Some of them discharge to, like Canton, for example, but portions of the county discharge to.
Do they pay by city, or does the county give us money towards it, or will we increase this? Will there be an increase on what they're paying for the usage? How does that work?
So the way that works is essentially what is paid out of that 2101, and this is why this account is very specific towards sanitary. What is paid out of that 2101 and the 14, I believe, and the other accounts, I don't want to get them mixed up, we send our monthly bill over to the sanitary engineers at the county. And how they pay that is they pay it off of what their daily flow is. So, for example, if they discharge 50% of our plant's capacity, million gallons per day, for example, let's just say we're at 10 million gallons per day of flow coming into the treatment plant, and what the county is distributing to us is 5 million gallons per day. Well, they are paying 50% of the bill, of our monthly bill that we spend out of the 2101. That's how we receive revenue from the county. So as far as if they're going to receive an increase, well, we're going to be improving our system more and more, right? So we're going to be spending more. So essentially the county's going to have to reimburse us more because they're contributing 50% towards our flow, so.
And that line is in this graph too. Mr. Lewis?
I just wanted to clarify, I know with stormwater, I was, looking at the 5 years. With sewer, while I'm not excited about going out longer, I do look at these two distinct ways and differently. One, Sewer, for me, the way I see it is it's a fee for service, essentially. It's not all that different than Kimball or any other service when you have waste removed from your home. It's this is a service that is provided, and this is the fee for that service. Where stormwater is more of an infrastructure improvement, which is also covered through other revenues. So it's a slight difference. So that's why I'm not necessarily objecting. I'm not excited about going out that far, but as far as the type of service it is, it would make sense to me, or it seems more reasonable to me to go ahead and project out and continue those increases beyond that. So I don't necessarily have an objection to the sanitary side. It was only the stormwater side, if that makes sense to anybody.
It does, thank you.
I do want to clarify one thing. Storm sewer technically is also a service. Your downspouts, a lot of residents' downspouts do tie into our storm sewer system. So I just want you to be very aware of that. So when it rains, your gutters, all the rainwater coming from your roof into your gutters, down your downspout, a lot of residents, especially like in our newer allotments, their downspouts are tied into the public infrastructure on the storm sewer side. So if we can't main the storm sewer side, then their downspouts essentially will not work. And you may get essentially flooding up against your home if your downspout line is not taking the water away from your home. So I just want to be very clear, there still is a service there, and that's why there is a fee associated with storm sewer. So, just
Mr. Ray?
Thank you, Ms. Sue. I have a question. Isn't it code that if you remove those downspouts, that they have to continue to go down in the ground? Like if I was to change the gutters in the systems,
Nope, you can daylight it onto the ground away from your home. I wouldn't recommend daylighting them straight down onto the ground where it can essentially load up against your home's foundation. I would discharge it away from your home. But yeah, you're able to do that. We like for it to tie into the storm sewer system. Reason being because a lot of times what will happen is you'll have your downspout line tie in through like a curb cut. Like maybe you've seen like some holes that come through a curb when you're driving around town maybe. Those are essentially downspout lines that are cut through the curb, and they discharge water away from your home. Problem with that is a lot of times ice will accumulate through the winter months. So when it rains, water comes out of there, and you have a lot of water along your streets. And then if it freezes, you have sheets of ice. So that's why we like to tie it into the storm sewer system, because then you don't have to deal with that. So.
well, see, the residents in my ward, we take the sewer system and the storm as one, because there's some malfunctions going on inside the lines where it can rain really heavy and they were blending the lines. So the infrastructure inside of both of them are a problem. And yes, it's an issue when you have to clean up stuff that's not yours out of your basement. So I think it's very, very important that we do something to give you guys some teeth so we can go ahead and get that taken care of. I'm kind of tossed up about the 5-year due to the fact that, yes, we're looking at the fact that we may be receiving revenue, but at least if we raise it for the 10 years, we know we'll be receiving that money. And then the rest would be in addition. Thanks.
Yeah, so as far as a combined system, we're not permitted to do that. So I hope your residents. That's why yeah. So yeah, I'm guessing maybe it's just like infiltration or something in the sanitary lines, but.
So, well, technically, the issue was in our area right down by 21, and they said that the issue was coming back from Stark County, and the city were going back and forth as to where the issue was coming from. And I think we were having issues getting it cameraed and back and forth. So I think, yeah, that needs to apply something to that. How about that? That's all we have to say about that. My wife would love that.
Poor thing. Anyone else? Thank you, Alex. Thank you. Thank you all for your questions. That's all for Public Utilities and Environmental.
Thank you, Councilwoman Brian Huth. Let's move to community development. Councilwoman Creamer.
I have nothing for community development, Mr. Lombardi.
Thank you. On to economic development. Councilman Ray.
I have nothing for economic development. Thank you.
Thank you. On to health, welfare, and building regulations. Councilwoman Cunningham.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. If Mr. Mack would like to come up, please, and I'm hoping that some of you may have some questions this evening for more discussion.
On what topic, Mrs. Cunningham?
On the code enforcement of property, rental property?
The ICC?
All of the property.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Right,
that's more than rental.
So we had questions last week, and people were to call Mr. Mack if they had individual questions, or if you've thought of questions, to ask him this evening, please. Thank you, Mr. Mack.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Appreciate the council members that have met with me. I don't know if it's my job to call on you or. There we go. Thank you. You've had some great discussions with a few of your membership. Happy to answer any more questions. I know we've had some follow-up that we discussed, at least when we met.
We did on Friday. Councilwoman Joy Hartwig and myself met with Mr. Mack on Friday to discuss some of this. And on that note, for everyone's sake, Mrs. Hartwig brought this up previously, where there is a version, a printed copy, and I would like it if every council person could get a copy of this.
It came in email.
But if we could get a
Yeah,
printed.
Diane sent that to all of us.
Well, maybe if it's printed, sometimes it's a little bit, I believe it's 54 pages.
I have a hard copy right here if anybody would like it. I have one.
Oh, 51. Sorry, I was off. And through our discussions on Friday, I don't want to speak for you, Julie, but it might be nice for all council people to review this, to see if there are any proposed laws or regulations that you feel that might not be warranted for our community, or our community might have angst over some of these. And if we could, and Ms. Hartwig brought up one idea is to do it on chapters. So possibly each city council meeting do a chapter, like 1 or 2 chapters, this, and then maybe a couple chapters, so it's not all at once. But I think myself and Julie, there's some of the proposed regulations are a little bit difficult, but apparently, we have some currently that, as Mayor Slutz mentioned once in conversation, that aren't generally enforced. So it's kind of a very gray area. They're there, but they're not enforced, and some people might be afraid that if they were enforced, they would be in violation of some of these, myself, and so.
Mrs. Harwick Smith?
I'll give you an example, and this is kind of sounds silly, but I mean, if code enforcement is going to be out carousing neighborhoods and writing violations to people, and they want to be able to print it right there, and these are supposed to be basic minimal laws, and I went through and most of them are, and a lot of them are very similar to what we have. But for example, we have a law that says you have to have your street numbers displayed on your house and be visible from the road. And here, and I should have brought it in, I actually changed my numbers on my house this year, and the one I took down is black and white, and you can see the numbers, you always could. I just, bought a nicer one because this one was plastic, but they were only 3 inches long. And here it specifically says they must be 4 inches by a ½ inch. And even my new one, it's only a ¼ inch in place. And that sounds silly, but I mean, if these are in here, then these are things that they can go around and start writing tickets for people, code violations for. And so I really think it's important to go through it and look at it and see if you want changes. Actually, as I'm going through, a lot of stuff is just very basic stuff. Some of it, you get into plumbing and electrical, and it's way over my head. We have things about exteriors now. Are we gonna get so nitty-gritty as it in here that, if the glazing around a window is cracked, that's a violation? or does it just need to be sealed from the exterior? I mean, so I think we need to look closely at some of those fine things. Edmund said that we can write down what changes we want to make, if we want to make any, and institute it before this, with the long-term goal, and correct me if I'm
everything- I
saying
agree.
this
Yeah,
wrong.
everything- nothing
With the
is correct.
long-term goal, and the reason too, it's like, just the name, International Property Maintenance Code, kind of immediately puts people on edge or whatever, but we actually adopted something in 2011, the same thing, but we never really updated it. And so our problem gets to be in enforcement, with the long-term goal being that we can pull things out easier, when you're writing them, here's this ordinance, it's the number, and it's more organized and going from the basic. There's a lot of our laws that are way, way more detailed on things than what's in here. And we're gonna have to look at that too. Like down the road, do we keep those? Or down the road, do we eventually just, weed those out and just go with the basic? But, so, I mean, we really need to look at it. One of the things I don't know, in section 105, right in the beginning, it talks about the duties and the powers of the code officials. And 105.21, page 10, where it talks about the code official is authorized to require the owner or owner's agent to provide a technical opinion or report. And it talked about that in other things where, like, if there was a violation and a question, a test methods, a code official, like 105.214, page 11, approved testing procedures, that in the absence of test standards, the code official shall approve the testing procedure. How are we
What's the
going
section number?
Section 105.214, like test methods,
Page 11,
page 11.
top of the page.
It says the code official can require someone to have design submittals prepared by and bear the stamp of a registered design professional. So does that mean, like, the code official can say, I think your foundation is no good and cracked, and then we're not going to be responsible, it says, for anything, but then if they're like, my foundation is fine, no water's leaking in, does that mean, like, our code enforcement will be like, well, now you have to go pay to get a professional study done to show me that it's not? I mean, I just don't know how to interpret this, you know what I mean? That the code official has that authority.
So
And it goes in later on, there's other things about the authority, like, has to be designs by professional. Sometimes people build garages or, put up sheds and it's not,
that's something that we see a lot more with commercial demolitions, that type of procedure, and that's something that's within the ambit of the chief building official. Let me study that.
okay.
And
'Cause it just sounds,
we're back on
how far are
higher.
they gonna apply something down on something?
Right, like a glazing on the residential windows.
Right.
Somebody gonna hire.
And
an
you can go
architect.
down later and just even that section, you go down later and same thing, it says, registered design professional. The code enforcement officer can tell you that you have to submit things from a design professional.
And that does happen in commercial context or when someone wants to use a substitute material that's not approved by the Ohio Board of Building Appeals. So if something's not already identified in the building code, under certain circumstances, the State Board of Building Appeals can approve it, and that's a system that would encompass the chief building official's responsibilities too. Let me look at that
Okay.
in more detail. But I would add to, agree with everything that you've said, right? And Councilman Packley and Harwick Smith, I mean, we met for an hour and 40 minutes. Thank you for, your intellectual investment in this. This is something that does fit together as like a uniform document. A lot of jurisdictions have adopted this across the United States, all the cities and Stark counties. But to your point, that doesn't mean every single provision as written is right for Massillon. And so that's why this exercise makes sense.
Can I go on? For like section 106.1, we made adjustments to the, that's where we made some changes. That's why you see the changes in our packet, because there's a change in here. So if you look at the proposal in front of it with the changes and you go to 106.1 on page 12, where it talks about appeals.
Yeah.
So we were changing 106.1 and 106.3, but what I'm looking at there's like the 106.2 where it talks about limitations of authority. Is that going to still be in there?
That's, as it is written, I believe it's not changed by our ordinance, and that would be a common provision to have in there, and for the other members' benefits. And the current section reads, "An application for appeal shall be based on a claim that the true intent of the code or the rules legally adopted have been incorrectly interpreted, or the code do not fully apply, or an equivalent of construction is proposed." The board does not have authority to waive the requirements of the code.
And that's the part I question.
Yes, because under, same with our Board of Zoning Appeals, right? They can grant variances, but they can't completely waive the requirements of the code, of the zoning code.
So they can grant variances as a form. So then when you get down to the qualifications for the board,
That's been changed.
that part we are changing. I think it's probably a good thing for qualifications of the board that they should not be employees of the jurisdiction. So we're taking, I don't see that in our changes, so are we taking that out? And the reason I'm saying this, because I've had people say they went to the Board of Appeals and it was the same people that was like in the office and working and everything else that are,
As a conflict.
that are making it as a conflict of interest, how we have it set up now. So perhaps our Board of Appeals, we need to make sure that we do comply with that part and they are not employees of the jurisdiction, so we don't have bias.
Well, so our existing Board of Appeals, it's already established under our ordinances. It's comprised of fire marshal, I don't have it. I believe the engineer's on it, a number of different officials are on that. Bias, I wouldn't phrase it that way at all. I'd say that these are the people within the city that have the professionalism and the training, like our fire inspectors, to be able to evaluate, apply the code and evaluate an appeal, because they're hearing an appeal from a code enforcement's determination. If we were to change that, we would have to change the makeup of the Board of Building Appeals, which I'd have to review that and see if that's not something that's already defined in the revised code.
Well, in what you're saying, Mr. Mack, is different than the people in the office. So if it's the fire marshal and the engineer and the department heads and those with expertise, that's a different group of people than the people in code enforcement.
For
which is
sure.
How I heard it the first time it was read.
For sure, and thank you for that. Yeah, like our health commissioners on the Board of.
And that
Building
would
Appeals.
make sense.
Yeah.
Those are the people with the expertise.
Pro Tem Lombardi, you have a question?
Thank you, Councilwoman Cunningham. In the event that we have conflicting or redundant laws that are just differing a little bit, are we going to write into this that the ICC law would take precedence and make sure that there's not going to be any handpicking as to which law we're going to hold somebody accountable to?
If there's a conflict, the intention is for the newest adoption of the, like you just said, yeah, exactly what you just said.
Okay, thank you.
Councilman Kramer?
Okay, I'm just thinking out loud right now. So there's 51 pages. I have not reviewed those yet. But you're telling me it's my responsibility to read 51 pages and determine what we want our code enforcement to enforce in the city? It's going to be up to us. Why don't they read the 51 pages?
They did.
And they present, I know we have some in our ordinance, we have some here that's tabled, but provide all of their requests to us, and then we determine, yes, we accept this one, no, we don't. But I don't think it's our job to read through 51 pages and tell code enforcement, yes, no, yes, no. We're counsel.
Mrs. Kramer, I have to agree with you, because what do we really know?
Well,
I mean, we're supposed to.
we're going to educate ourselves, but
Right.
should I?
The people that enforce
That's
these
just my
and
thoughts.
see the changes or the damages or the questionable procedures know better than what we do. And I have to agree with you on that one.
I know there's,
Mr. Lewis, Councilman Lewis.
I just wanted to say to that, I don't want to speak for the administration, but I would assume what is in front of us is them saying we have read the 51 pages and these are the 51 pages we want.
Yes.
And so that
This is coming from the law department.
this is their
Yes.
proposal to us. And then our duty would be to read through the 51 pages to the extent that we so individually desire, and then make a decision if we come into agreement with them or not. And so, yes, Ms. Hardwick-Smith, you are correct. If you want to go through every one of those pages and, look and call out questions that you have, that's absolutely correct. Or if you just want to peruse the 51 pages and sign off on it, that's up to you. Or, whatever each of us individually would want to do. But I would assume this is the administration saying, this is what we want.
That's right. And this is coming from the law department to fix the problems that we have existing in our ordinances that are extensive and deep.
Councilwoman Kramer?
But I thought I recall last time we talked about this, we were going to, if approved, enact the entire, whatever that is, the code. And they're going to have them simultaneously, and then eventually, over time, we're going to eliminate the duplication.
Both.
Okay, so if you're saying that the window sealant is cracked, and that's kind of a little, something we don't want to enforce because the extent of it, because we have houses that don't even have windows. But then we're going to write somebody up that has, sealant that's cracked, are we going to be picking and choosing, what we want to enforce, what we don't want to enforce, depending on, whatever the situation is? That's where I'm kind of, a little maybe unsure and maybe misunderstanding the ask from council at this point. But if individuals are going through and saying yay and nay, then I think we need a,
So it's whatever you want to do, right? Our recommendation, our legal advice to you is, if you want to take code serious and go through the process of improving and enhancing the laws that we have, this is the mechanism to do it. When we adopt the International Property Maintenance Code, you have an ordinance in front of you that would do exactly that and enact it here in Massillon. If there are changes that you want specifically as to any particular provision, you can make those changes now, right? We would certainly encourage far few, because if it's completely gutted and there's only 3 provisions left, then, what's the point of the exercise? But yes, if you want to do that now, make tweaks later, once you see what it's like, once our code department gets their sea legs in using this the right way, that's something that you can do later as well. That's certain, your prerogative.
Councilman Ray?
Thank you, Councilperson Cunningham. My question is also the statement as far as the glazing, okay? So I can see glazing maybe not being in there. I don't see our code enforcement window watching and walking around and looking to see if the windows are glazed. But say, for instance, if there's a landlord and the renter has to pay the heating bill, but he won't fix the glaze, I see that being a point for code enforcement to get involved. So I think there's a back and forth as to any of these codes to be applied. So what I think is that, like you said, I recommend that we bring it forth and then use it as a case by case. So like, okay, that's too much. Or instead of having to read the whole 51 pages or whatever, these aren't like felonies. These are like, get this fixed. You're not gonna get fined, fix this. If you don't, argue it. Say, no, I'm not going to fix it. I don't have a reason to fix it. It's more so for people who are renting, who are put in bad positions, I would say, right? Correct?
Can be, yeah.
Yeah, for the most part. Because, a homeowner I can pull a permit to build my shed in my backyard, even if I'm not a carpenter. But then they come inspect it, and then they approve it. So either way, you still have that ability to, you have that leeway as a homeowner. But renters don't have that, so.
It's to all of the great comments, I would add, is that this is not something that's novel. This document is a known quantity both in the United States and in Stark County. Alliance, Louisville, North Canton have all adopted. We tried to adopt it, we didn't do it the right way. This makes that clear and puts this in place.
Councilman Lewis?
My apologies if this has already been answered. Is this primarily still complaint-driven?
Yes?
And I think that's an important point. Yes, it is true that if it's in the law, it's in the law. But if we want to talk about window glazing, to Mr. Ray's point, it's going to be driven by complaint. So if you want to call Mayor Slutes and complain about your own window glazing and you're the homeowner, then, then I guess you're going to fix it. But that's the point to the renters. Now, I also understand the point that if it's in the law, it's in the law, and if code enforcement had a reason to be at your home for some reason and you had a violation, then technically they could cite you. But I don't think that's a whole lot different than what we currently have in code with a lot of things. It's primarily complaint-driven. So I'm still trying to, get that all going. But we brought up another point, and you do not have to necessarily have an answer tonight because I did not do the responsible thing of calling you in advance.
No problem.
We can wait till the next conversation if need be. But how will two codes exist simultaneously if they're conflicting with each other?
The intent will be to, and we talked about this at length during our meeting, is to eventually repeal both of the ordinances that are in place that talk to these issues. We have right now two code sections that do the same thing in many ways. There are cases, number one, already in the pipeline that we don't want to pull those laws out for cases that I'm prosecuting, for instance, in the common police court. Also, one of the code sections in particular has a building structure component to it that Chief Building Official Scylla does look at when he issues permits. So we don't want to, until we know exactly how it's going to play out, repeal those at this time, but we are going to come and ask to repeal those.
Are we able to somehow write it that this is the law of the land, these codes after such and such date will no longer be used, however, any violations that are currently under review under the previous code are still fully liable
So
under
we
that
have
code?
the provision to, I think Councilman Lombardi or Councilman Ray's point, that if there's a conflict, this prevails.
Okay. Okay.
We're going to ask you in about probably 12 months or 48 months.
So we're right at that when there's a conflict between the two, the new one prevails. I
Right.
guess that suffices. I'm sorry if that was already answered.
Councilman Gregg?
Thank you, Councilwoman Cunningham. So you stated before, I believe, Mr. Mack, that this is a tool for the code enforcement to use. Excuse me, a tool they're going to have to come up to speed on and then enforce. My opinion is that we need to give them credit for some common sense application of this tool. And kind of go along the lines with, yeah, they're not going to be walking around everybody's house looking at the glazing on their windows, right? That wouldn't make any sense. Even though in the law it says you have to have it, right? But like I said, I think I've dealt with our code enforcement office very positively, and I think we need to give them credit for being able to, in a common sense way, apply this new tool. Thank you.
I believe Mr. Hurricane wants to say something, but Mr. Ray, Councilman Ray, I'll let you speak first.
Thank you. I would just a tribute to what Councilman Gregg was saying. Yes, they put forth the effort so they can have the ability to do what they need to do. But also in that, is it written where does the grandfathering thing still applies? Like, say, for instance, if the code is for handrails and it has to be like 32 inches and those older porches that are like 22, they're good to go. They can't get a fine.
No,
No?
so you're speaking more like, we're talking about ADA
Yeah.
compliance?
Yes.
Now, that's kind of, I'm getting way off.
Okay.
Ahead of my skis here, but it's kind of a misconception that the ADA has a grandfathering component to it. It doesn't.
Yes.
If something is in violation now, are they going to be grandfathered? And I'd say, you'd have to look at a case-by-case basis, but I'd say generally speaking, the answer is no.
Okay. The reason why I ask is just like, say, for instance, if I go to do a porch or a deck and they already have the little landing where like kids can trip over them, like, the older houses have that really short handrail. Well, they're not made to change it to 36. Unless you touch it, then it has to be brought up to 36. So that's why I was wondering about the grandfathering.
Councilwoman Howard Smith.
Well, if we're going, I mean, and that's why everyone needs to read it. It goes into details to like handrails and how many steps and how tall, and we have those laws now, and that's why you have to,
How far the spindles
Right.
are, your kid head won't go through
Right.
it, all that.
right.
Yeah.
You know, but these are supposed to be basic laws, and bottom line, if it's a law, then someone can be written a violation for it if it's in here. I mean, we look at our garbage, I have Kimball, I have unlimited garbage. They provide me with cans with lids. People are supposed to have cans with lids. They also, I pay extra for unlimited trash. Just for an example, last week I threw out some cabinets. They don't fit in my trash can. I set them beside the trash can. Same thing if I, put an appliance out there, my trash man will take it. Door off, mattress have to, they have existing rules that they can't pick things up. I don't know why we're getting into details in here about people's has to be in a can with a lid. So then all these people, when they're trying to get, throw out my cabinets last week, technically, I would have been in violation under the garbage thing. No, if you read it, yes, I would. If you read, this will be our code.
It would have to be items that are trash.
Or
You can't
things
put
too,
it with
I mean,
trash.
as far as biodegradable, but, people can put bikes or trash or other things, I mean, when it says all things must be in a thing, that's all things, so it's all how, and we're supposed to not, it's not up for us to interpret it, it's just, or they enforce it, but if it's the law and we're gonna be that picky, then that code enforcement could enforce it on people. And then, you get into the enforcement, and then the next thing we have to look at is this whole process, of what their fines and appeals are. I mean, I agree that we need some fines and stuff, but especially with this new things, if someone feels that they were wronged and they want to make an appeal, I don't feel they should have to pay, and they don't have the money for the fine now, I don't feel they should have to pay $100 to appeal it. Otherwise, we're not going to get any feedback if there's a problem. If you start seeing appeals all about the same code law, we want people to be able to come forward and say there's a problem with this, so we know if there's something we need to change. So as far as paying for a $100 appeal, I think we should get rid of that. And then what we would need to look at too is how much we're charging. I mean, for the very first fine, $250. You don't do it the next fine, $350, and the next one, $500. That's steep. Then you're also talking misdemeanors and everything on top. I mean, that's really steep.
No,
I mean.
we
maybe
just
you think
lost
so?
5 buildings downtown and fined people pennies, and they felt no retribution whatsoever. And all of those buildings are crumbling. These are not steep.
Well, it
They're not
depends on what
enough.
you're finding them. If you're finding them for the whole
Excuse me,
structure-
Councilwoman Cunningham.
Yeah.
We're going to have
Yeah.
to take this to another committee meeting. Let the city officials that want to
wanna
speak
speak,
on this,
yes.
and then we'll have
Mr.
to move
Hernkane?
on.
Mr. Mayor? Thank you.
Good evening, council. I just wanted to let you know that, we don't want to implement these codes to bring the hammer down on people. We have ordinances now. This has been something that, since I've been on city council in 2021, that we've been addressing. We're trying to address these issues now that haven't been addressed, and we feel that this international code is what is going to help our code enforcement best. With all due respect, Mrs. Harvick-Smith, with your house numbers, we don't want our code enforcement going out and writing $100 tickets because your house numbers are not big enough. We want to work with our residents to make sure that they're in compliance with that. People have asked me, well, what if somebody can't afford it? We have a housing department that can work with people that cannot afford to take care of their soffit or their house numbers or any other issues that they may have. These ordinances are for the landlords who refuse to do work, such as soffits. We have code enforcement that go out and they say, hey, here's a notice for 30 days. You need to have your soffit fixed. And they go back out in 30 days and it's not fixed. These ordinances are going to give them some teeth. Okay, you don't want to fix that. Okay, here's $100 ticket, and here's 30 more days to fix this. And we go back out in 30 days, it's not fixed again. If it is fixed, and correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Mack, if it is fixed, then they still pay those fines, those $100 fines?
On the first one, they would.
On the first one, it's waived then. So, like I said, this has been an issue for 4 years. And we doubled the staff in code enforcement at the beginning of the year. Now, this is the next step that we have to take to address some of the other issues that code enforcement are having, enforcing some of these laws, and to basically give them more teeth to enforce these ordinances. So that's all I wanted to say. Thank you very much. Does anybody have any questions for me? Thank you.
Mr. Hernkane?
Thank you, Councilwoman Cunningham. Just a couple things I'd like to add to this is there are over 14,000 housing units in the city, and as the mayor stated, there are 4 code enforcement officers. That's a lot of complaints, that's a lot of issues out there, and code has to prioritize their calls. And the first thing, the top item when they prioritize a call is violations that pose an imminent threat to safety and the health of our citizens. Those are the complaints that get the first priority. Because any given day, these guys are going to walk in with emails and voice messages and other complaints, and they have to use some type of a metric to determine what they tackle first. First, they tackle threats to public health and safety. Second is violations that affect our storm drainage, wetlands, and other type of environmental concerns, like you can't empty your swimming pool into the storm drain. The next level is our junk and zoning violations. If bad enough, these pose serious health concerns to the homeowner or the tenant and the neighbors. Construction of non-permitted structures, multiple complaints received on the same property, zoning violations, things like that. So with the amount of caseload that they have, when we talk about window glazing and house numbers, although yes, technically it's listed in the code, it's like the equivalent of driving 26 in a 25 mile per hour zone. Yeah, technically you're speeding, but you're not likely to get pulled over by a police officer. Those types of things, although they are in there, are kind of the lowest hanging fruit. Now, I'd love to see a place where we don't have any of the things that I just mentioned as concerns. And if the only thing that code has to deal with in the city of Massillon is to run around and check for window sizes and house numbers, and that'd be a great thing, but that's not realistic. There was an article a couple months ago, and I'm going to echo what the mayor said. There was an article in the repository a couple months ago, middle of September. A landlord whose name I will not mention, who is a problem for us in the city, sold all of his properties in the city of Canton, about 80 rental homes, to a reputable, large, well-known property management firm. Basically because over the last 5 or 6 years, Canton did the same thing, cracked down, and he said, I'm out of here. Because they fined him, they issued him court citations, and we've seen this with some others too. When other jurisdictions get tougher on these things, they come looking at us, right? Well, we need to start getting tougher, so they start looking at other places too. Councilwoman Brian Huth, I think, mentioned the downtown buildings. Yes, we have 2 buildings that are coming down that, frankly, are 30 years or more in the making. What we want to do with this, because it applies to residential and commercial, is to make sure that we have the enforcement mechanism to make sure that this doesn't happen in the future. We can't change the past, but we can look at how we address this moving forward. I hope that you, when the time comes, consider this. I hope you also consider putting it on the agenda sooner than the beginning of January. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hernkane. Any other comments or questions?
Did you want to schedule a committee
Yes.
meeting?
Yes.
Just one simple comment. In our meeting on Friday, it was mentioned by Mr. Mack that you can't segregate between commercial and residential property with enforcement activity, so it all has to be bundled into one. So there was that thought process. So just to let everyone know, they can't be separated. That's it. Thanks.
Okay, committee meeting. in 2 weeks prior to the work session, which would be, I don't have December calendar. December 9th? All right, December 9th at 5:45, would that work?
Make it 5:30, Sarita, because this is gonna,
Take a while.
this is gonna take weeks to get this ironed out here.
5:30?
So give it an hour.
Okay. Diane, can you schedule that for 5:30, please?
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. That's all for my committee.
Thank you, Councilwoman Cunningham.
Thank you, Chairwoman. Thank you, Council.
And then Parks and Rec, Councilwoman Harwick Smith.
I have nothing for Parks and Rec this evening.
I have nothing for police and fire this evening. Public utilities is already gone, so it brings us to rules and courts and civil service. Mr. Gregg.
Thank you, President Pro Tem. I do have one new item to discuss. Please prepare an ordinance to amend Section 2D occupation list of class titles of ordinance number 127, 1997 to increase the class grade pay schedule for the golf course ground superintendent within the 920 golf course department from 14S to 16S to 20S to 21S. This item was passed by the Massillon Recreation Board by a 5-0 vote. I notice Mr. Pedro is here, if he'd like to come forward.
Good evening. As Mr. Gregg stated, the rec board recommended this and approved it at our last meeting to increase this salary for our superintendent at the golf course. I will answer any questions that I can right now if you have any.
That person is, correct me if I'm wrong, that person is like the number 2 person at the course in terms of?
Yes, we have a golf course manager and then the golf course superintendent. The golf course superintendent obviously takes care of all the grounds.
Okay. Last time there was a pay increase?
Last time for him was, I mean, other than the 3%, he was brought in 10 years ago at the 30-year rate because they needed someone. I wasn't here. I know there were some people that left and quit abruptly at that time, so they really had to, they were under a crunch to get someone. And I know that's why they put him at that 30-year rate at the 16S.
But you're saying it's been 10 years since there was?
Other than the 2 and 3% we've
Yeah.
had, yes, yes.
Okay.
He's been, this will be, 2025 will be his 10th year.
Other question, Mr. Lewis?
Yes, does he have direct reports that report to him, and if so, how many?
He's responsible for all of the ground crew. Could be anywhere between 15, 20, 30 people throughout the year.
And then, how did we come to the 21S request?
What I did, I looked at the state average for like courses, like our legends, and this will put him right at that average.
And what's the increase amount to?
It will be, he'll go from 59 to 65.
59 a year to 60?
Yes, yes, and that 65 will put him right at the state average for municipal like golf courses. Now, I will tell you, the Legends is a little bit unique with 27 holes, and we are a little different, but it falls kind of under those guidelines.
Do we know how this aligns with other employees in the city, like comparable 20, like who else do we have that are 21Ss in their job duties? I know you might not know that.
I don't have that answer.
That would be my only thing. It seems like it's reasoned. I get your reason. It seems like it's accomplishable. It's able to be accomplished through the budgetary process. It's only a $6,000 increase. But I just wondered where that aligns with other departments and where we have 21Ss at. And I doubt anybody can pull that right out of their back pocket.
If I may, I don't know that there's another department that has the structure that we have in order. I just think it's a little bit unique with Parks and Rec because there's so many people with,
No, I agree with you. And the only reason I'm asking that is because I'm always cautious, because if you do this here, and then there's someone over here that's like, wait a minute, hold on, and then all of a sudden I have to make them a 24 or a 23, you know what I'm saying? Or they're at a 17 now. So I'm looking to see what the trickle-down effect on a citywide level is, not that your assessment is off.
Other questions? Mr. Ray?
How long, and you might have already covered this, but how long has he worked with the city, with Parks and Rec?
2025 will be his 10th year.
10th year?
He's been a golf course superintendent for over 15 years.
Okay. 15 to 15 to, okay.
Mr. Lewis?
All right, so my next follow-up, I think Lori might be able to help us, Ms. Katagiz-Moore might be able to, but, and this is my general rule of thumb, it's just what I've always recommended, is we have to be cautious that when we make classification changes like this, we are making it because we believe that the job, and you did look at other people to see what that job was demanding, make sure that the job warrants the classification, not the person. Because if the person leaves, the classification stays. So the classification needs to match the job. That's why I appreciate hearing that you went and looked at other scales. But I would like to see if Ms. Katagiz-Moran can speak to at all about 21S and where that aligns with others. She nodded her head. She should have not nodded.
While she comes up, one thing you mentioned made me curious. You said we're not quite like other courses because of the 27 holes. Are other courses mostly 36 holes or mostly 18?
Mostly 18.
So we're a little larger than most other,
Oh, yes,
but with a similar structure.
yes.
Thank you.
Can I do this from back here? Do you mind? Okay. So with the help of my partner back there, Stephanie, these are 20s that are actually in the city right now. So we have Fred in the engineering department. So he's a civil engineer 3. We have, let's see, somebody in wastewater, our housing director, and 2 of our prosecutors are all 20s at this time. Some are classified, some are unclassified.
So it's probably hard to say if, well, those positions don't sound like they necessarily are supervising large staffs.
They're
They're skilled instead.
They're skilled, yeah, they're skilled. If you're talking about engineering and wastewater and prosecutor, those are more skilled positions. Then the community housing would be more of a community-oriented focus on that part, so.
Okay. Again, I was just trying to see if there would end up being, if we put ourselves in a bad spot, that would then cause other changes.
If I may add, you brought up the word skilled. This is a skilled person, a skilled position. And again, it has nothing to do with the individual. If we were to lose someone like that, it would, I'll be honest, it would be rough hiring somebody else.
Because obviously he needs to be our, for lack of a better term, foremost expert on how to handle greens.
Absolutely.
Which is not your grass in your backyard, or how to handle a sand trap. And its proper mitigation of water and whatnot.
Other questions, discussion? So this does have emergency language on this. And you saying we need to pass this quickly to be effective January?
That was my goal, to start this in the new year, yes.
Okay. Again, any further questions or discussion? No?
Yeah.
Mr. Ray?
Thank you. So now, with that being said, with the position being where you said it a little touchy, would he be in a position where he can intern and maybe possibly train someone to do what he does just in case?
He has an assistant, we have an assistant groundskeeper as well.
Okay.
And that person should know just
Exactly what he
being
knows.
right with them.
There it is.
That's the assistant position.
All right, thank you. We'll put this on the agenda for Monday. Thank you.
What's the title of the event? At what time?
It's on Do Not Disturb, man. Who said, hey, Google?
That's all I have for rules and courts. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilman Gregg. Streets, highways, and traffic safety, Councilman Packley.
Nothing at this time.
Thank you. And Councilman Lewis, finance.
Yes, our first piece here is appropriate 22,000 from the unappropriated balance of the 3107 Fire Damage Structure Fund to the Fire Damage Structure account. Basically, we just had one of these a few weeks ago. You know, when there's a fire in town, money has to be deposited on the city. Once everything is taken care of, that money is put back into the appropriate person's hands. Are there any questions or discussion this evening? Today the 25th? I'm a little behind the times today. I was trying to date things 11/12. I don't know what happened in the last 2 weeks. No, we can't. The next one is please prepare legislation to appropriate from the unappropriated balance of the general fund, $37,400. This is our school district revenue sharing, and this is what we have to pay into the school district revenue sharing. Does anybody have any questions about this? Okay, these next ones. Diane, you know I like to bundle. These next three, I want to bundle these next three. So, please prepare an ordinance to reduce appropriations. School district TIFs by $9,583.77. Developer TIFs by $17,553.69. County collection fees $7,033.07 for a total of $34,170.53. For those of you who are newer to council, as we get close to the end of the year, we'll probably see some more in a couple of weeks. We have to start zeroing out accounts. So you see that in our transfers, and you also see it in legislation. And all we are doing is reducing the appropriations in those. That money just kind of goes into like, now correct me if I'm wrong, it stays in the general fund. It's just not appropriated here.
Correct. I mean, this is.
Yeah, just so I make sure I explain it. I know what's going on, but I want to make sure I use the right words. You can just come to the back.
All of these funds are funded by the TIFs that we get from real estate. The general fund's not putting any money into them, and then we're just getting it from the county and then sending it right back out to either the schools or LRC Meadows or the museum. So that's why they need to be zeroed out, because there's no cash. Once we get it in, we give it right back out.
Does that make sense? We're just passing it through to the appropriate people. All right. The next one is reduced for the Massillon Museum and its fees, a total of $37,490.38. And then the last one is reduced for the Hills and Dales. What is the Hills and Dales?
That was a project, but it was in the 1409, and this is, the project was done, and they bill the county? They bill the county, and the county reimburses us again. It's one where we pay ahead, and then they reimburse us. But the original and the budget was higher than what they actually needed.
All right, any questions on any of those? You might as well hang out, because I'm not going to be able to explain this one well either. I know we do it almost pretty much every year. It's please prepare legislation authorizing the auditor and the mayor of the city of Massillon, Ohio to enter into a one-year contract with local government services section of the auditor of state to compile the basic financial statements for the city of Massillon and the city of Massillon Health Department for the year ending December 31st, 2024. Go ahead.
Earlier, we had passed to do our actual audit. The company that does our audit, this is the company that does our financial statements. But it's the state of Ohio is who does it, basically.
Any questions on this? All right, thank you. All right, we have transfers. First transfer we have is in the Park Department. Reduced salary by $7,565, placing it into Senior Center, $775 salary, and then Hospital Eye Dental by $6,790. This is to realign the budget to pay for the salary and insurance through the end of the year. Legends reduced capital improvements by $11,413.89, placing it into salary, and then reducing supplies material by $220, placing it into PRS, and realign the budget to pay for salaries at the Legends. Auditor, travel seminar schooling reduced by $1,000, placing into supplies and materials. Safety Service Director reduced the PRS by $1,210 and placing it into Hospital Eye and Dental to realign their budget. Police reduced the comp by $10,000 and placing it into overtime. Police reduced their comp by $26,930.54, placing it into insurance.
Is that the same?
One was into, went into the overtime, and then the other was for the insurances. Police, service and contracts by $5,000, placing it into supplies. Miscellaneous accounts going to reduce state examination by $2,700 and placing it into the EAP. If you're not familiar, the EAP is a benefit that we offer our employees. They can usually call in and receive additional services and support and whatnot. Just a nice benefit for a lot of our employees. Street Department reduced their supplies by $1,500, putting it into the school district revenue sharing. And then Fire reducing supplies and materials by $7,000, putting it into services and contracts. Any questions about any of those? All right, next we do have the budget. We were going to have Chief Heck here. He was, however, unable to attend this evening. Ms. Bourne, Cudahy's Bourne, did you have anything you wanted to cover this evening? Did anybody have any questions about the budget? Typically, we would take the budget out, we would table it next Monday and take it out one more reading. But we've had very few questions from this council, which is fine if no one has questions. But I don't see the point of belaboring it if no one's going to bring additional questions or discovery relating that. So I would just bring it up for a vote on Monday unless somebody wanted something particular that I needed to organize to help answer questions. If that is not the case, that is all we have for Finance President Pro Tem.
Thank you, Councilman Lewis. That'll do it. We are adjourned.
The health insurance.
Wait, what?
I neglected to bring up health insurance, the health insurance contract. My apologies. Does anybody have any questions given the health insurance contract that is in front of the city council for this evening? If you do have questions, I do ask that you please reach out to Safety Service Director and maybe we can have some conversation at the next meeting. Okay. Thank you.
Now
Now I'm done.